The seminar officially begins. Before the seminar starts, I'll first mention the general agenda and some matters requiring attention. Our seminar today is mainly divided into two parts. In the first part, we'll invite Khenpo to give us teachings. Our theme is called Buddhism and Contemporary Society. Afterward is an interactive session. We'll leave 1 hour afterward for interaction. During this process, everyone please keep phones on vibrate or turn them to silent. Please maintain silence. Also, in the interactive session later, before asking questions, please raise your hand. After receiving permission, we can ask questions. I'll now introduce Khenpo Sodargye. Khenpo is a very renowned master nowadays. I think his characteristic is the unity of compassion and wisdom, mastery of both exoteric and esoteric teachings. On one hand, regarding Tibetan Buddhism, and on the other hand, regarding Han Chinese Buddhism. Exoteric and esoteric traditions, theoretically speaking, he can integrate them. Also, the unity of compassion and wisdom. On one hand, he's performed much merit benefiting sentient beings, such as sponsoring elementary schools, education, including funding university students. On the other hand, he's also conducted much Dharma propagation work, especially recently over this period of time, at some overseas universities and some famous domestic universities like Peking University, Tsinghua, Fudan, Beijing Normal University, Renmin University, etc. At many universities, he's given presentations. So today, we're very fortunate to have Khenpo come to exchange with us. Because today, time is relatively limited, first we'll invite Khenpo to give us teachings. All right, welcome.
Respected Dean, teachers and students, I'm very happy that today everyone is together here to explore Buddhism and contemporary society. Personally, today I also haven't had time to think and prepare, although this topic, this subject was told to me a few days ago, because recently there have been many matters. Today I also haven't thought about what kind of meaningful, valuable things to mainly expound to everyone. However, I think I'll first simply throw out a brick to attract jade, bringing up to everyone several aspects of issues that Buddhism and modern society are relatively concerned about. After that, everyone can speak freely together. In our brief time, we can exchange, discuss, and explore. Whatever ideas you have, you can directly speak out. Even if you feel some things are unreasonable, common doubts and views about Buddhism, I think nowadays the main purpose of our lectures and explorations is actually to dispel doubts and understand the truth revolving around such a theme. This very much conforms to our dialectical method and is extremely suitable for Buddhism's debate method. So I think what I'll share with everyone here today is mainly this. I think everyone present are scientific workers, using a scientific attitude to analyze issues at this time. Buddhism is from more than 2,500 years ago. Buddha Shakyamuni turned the wheel of 84,000 teachings. Such doctrines have been transmitted to the present. They're divided into Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, and Tibetan Buddhism. These are the three major systems in Buddhism mainly. Theravada Buddhism in current Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and Thailand is flourishing in these aspects. Mahayana Buddhism, like in Han regions and Japan, including now in some Southeast Asian countries, is also quite flourishing. Tibetan Buddhism at the beginning was transmitted directly from India to Tibet. Nowadays, from Tibet, it has transmitted to Europe and America. According to statistics, it's also spread to dozens of countries. Over these more than 2,500 years, to have such a spread, the scope should be very extensive. And its content, currently Buddhism's content, now the Tibetan Kangyur, what the Buddha expounded, what Buddha Shakyamuni said, the Kangyur has 108 volumes, particularly thick. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's been preserved very completely all along. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's not only preserved, but continuously lineage teachers receive and study it. In monasteries, there's always research and lineage. Therefore, there's a saying that Tibet has very many monasteries. Each monastery is actually different schools, large and small, because the main value of a monastery's existence is researching the content of Buddhist scriptures. Tibetan Buddhism is also like this. Others, including Pali Theravada Buddhism and Han Chinese Buddhism, these all have their lineages. Especially what I want to say is in Tibetan Buddhism, there are also large quantities of translated Indian treatises. Translation of treatises is very rare in Han Chinese Buddhism. I previously compared the Han Chinese Tripitaka with the Tibetan Tripitaka's general meaning. At this time, I discovered there are many recorded teachings of masters in Han Chinese Buddhism's Tripitaka, also recorded teachings of Indian masters, and of course some of the Buddha's own words. The so-called Tripitaka contains teachings from Indian and Han Chinese masters and the Buddha, these three types of teachings. But in Tibetan Buddhism's Tripitaka, there are only the Buddha's words. Additionally, there's what's called the treatises, the Tengyur. In this are entirely Indian masters' works like Bodhisattva Nagarjuna, Master Dignaga, Master Dharmakirti, very famous in history, called the Two Supreme Ones and Six Ornaments who adorn the entire world. Their works, now in Tibetan, are approximately over 200 volumes. The Dirge printing house wasn't persecuted during the Cultural Revolution and has been preserved until now. In the treatise canon, there are approximately 250 volumes. Besides this, works by Tibetan masters weren't placed in the Kangyur and Tengyur. They're not included in the Tripitaka. So I think personally, from childhood, I've had faith. Later, at approximately age 23, I became a monk. After becoming a monk for close to 30 years, I've continuously studied at a Buddhist institute. In the learning process, I increasingly feel it because previously I also studied some worldly things, including psychology, dialectics, etc. These aspects I was very interested in, mathematics, physics, and chemistry. But later, it seemed many problems were very difficult to resolve. Later, when analyzing with some Buddhist doctrines, that is to say, modern knowledge. Compared with ancient culture, the Buddha's classic thought from more than 2,500 years ago, I felt the Buddhist scriptures are indeed. Previously, Mr. Lu Xun and many wise people also praised them. The content of their praise indeed has very profound meaning. It's profound and unfathomable. Very difficult to reach such a state, very difficult to reach its other shore. I have this feeling. So wherever I go, I very much want to advise everyone to read more Buddhist books. Previously in history, like Master Uyi, he specially had a collection of reading the Tripitaka. He specially perused the Tripitaka, each Buddhist scripture's content, approximately their summaries, placed in the current Guide to Reading the Tripitaka. Previously, the Master of National Studies, Mr. Nan Huaijin, when at Mount Ame, he specially perused the Tripitaka, using 3 years' time to peruse it. Our Tibetan region also has many masters, very remarkable wise people. They're proficient in both astronomy and geography, and also proficient in our worldly various kinds of calendrical calculations. Masters like these also devoted themselves to research, using a lifetime to research. Just like in Tibet, there's one called Kongtrul Yonten Gyatso. He was approximately a master from close to over 100 years ago. He collected all of Tibet's lineage teachings, Nyingma school, Gelug school, Sakya school. Actually, Tibet has many lineages. These lineages' historical origins, according to the sutras and treatises Buddha Shakyamuni discussed, he collected them all together and compiled many books. Nowadays, they all exist in our Tibetan cultural treasury. So I myself feel that in Tibet, very much has been collected. A while ago at Harvard University in America, there was an old gentleman. He's already passed away. He used 50 years of his lifetime in various places in Tibet. Collected all the eminent masters and wise people's teachings, abundant sutras and treatises, all preserved according to modern technology on hard drives. After seeing this, I was very surprised. Of course, I'm speaking approximately. Actually, we always feel that religion or Buddhism, many people nowadays think it's very old, very ancient, outdated, as if not matching with current civilized science. There are such ideas and statements. Such statements actually indeed need observation. Why do I say this? Because current science, if truly speaking about the spiritual aspect, it's a blank slate. In adjusting the human mind, we have very, very many afflictions in life, greed, anger, delusion, etc., and also much great compassion, renunciation, faith, wisdom, how to elevate positive emotional aspects, and how to counter afflictions and suffering on the negative emotional side. In Buddhist psychology and the Buddhist path of practice, there are very special methods. Precisely because of this, nowadays also, including countries like America and Europe, in universities they establish various different Buddhist research institutions and Buddhist meditation centers. Meditation centers nowadays for adjusting the human body, especially developing the potential inherent in one's nature, are very effective. Because people now actually in life what they apply, among the energy we ourselves possess, what people truly can use doesn't even reach 10%. For example, a university professor or a highest level academician, actually wisdom in Buddhism it's called store consciousness, Tathagatagarbha consciousness. In Tathagatagarbha consciousness, there's much positive information and wisdom. This wisdom hasn't been used. Actually, we truly have the causes and conditions. For example, you have the ability to understand English, also the ability to understand Arabic, also the ability to elevate, to generate compassion toward all life under heaven. There's much, much potential. But this potential in other disciplines is very difficult to develop. So Buddhism, through meditation, through recognizing the nature of mind, at this time, a kind of self-recognition, this aspect is very important. Actually, Buddhism, mainly from the doctrinal aspect, everyone should have heard of the Four Dharma Seals, the foundation of Buddhism. Some people ask, between Buddhism and non-Buddhism, what's the difference? Buddhism emphatically expounded the Four Dharma Seals. What are the Four Dharma Seals? Perhaps among those present, some have heard, some haven't. But actually, when observing this with some current social concepts, we all must acknowledge the principles of the Four Dharma Seals. How are the Four Dharma Seals discussed? All compounded things are impermanent. All contaminated things are suffering. All phenomena are non-self. Nirvana is peace. There are such concepts. These concepts are actually very important. Why do I say this? Because all compounded things are impermanent. Many people present may have a relatively poor concept of impermanence. The houses we build, the things we do, our own lives, originally we can't live to 100 to 70. Perhaps when reaching 40 or 50, it's already halfway. Even if you truly can be considered long-lived, it's not necessarily so. The time living in the human world isn't very long, but we ourselves still think we'll live here for a very long time. This is because in our minds there's no concept of impermanence. This point, now in the worldly realm, momentary changes, our lives, instant changes, spring, summer, autumn, winter are all changing. The entire external universal world is also changing. Internally, our inner minds, including our own families, parents, emotions, life, much is all changing. Such a principle of impermanence, actually, it's not pessimistic. I often say to some people I know, even if you don't study Buddhism, understanding impermanence is very important. If you understand impermanence, whatever work we do, including fame, status, wealth, everything has a certain preparation. In life, anything can happen. This is very realistic. But in our lives, there's very little education in this aspect. So Buddhism says all phenomena are impermanent. Such impermanence in our everyday lives, if we don't have such a feeling, when problems appear in your emotions, when someone dies in your family, some people fundamentally seem unable to accept it. But actually, just like Steve Jobs before, every day he treated it as the last day of his life. When he finally really died, he still had very strong power. He could face death. People present also actually sometimes observing one's own lifespan. Oh, life actually is, when I depart, what will I leave behind? How much longer can my life last? Sometimes I see some elderly people or young people. Because we who study Buddhism, the difference from those present is that in values, many may not necessarily be the same. The clothes worn also may not necessarily be the same. But at this time, I also must generate this thought of mine. What's the thought I generate? I clearly perceive that everything about many people is impermanent, but worldly people regard it as extremely permanent. If it's as Buddhism discusses, there's no eternally unchanging matter for anything oneself has, at this time it may bring very great benefit to life. This is impermanence of all compounded things. Then all contaminated things are suffering. Perhaps many of us think the worldly realm is very beautiful, very happy. How could there be suffering? What Buddhism discusses is that the three realms of samsara are like a burning house, very painful. Is this a kind of pessimism? Actually, it's not pessimism. In our lives, is there happiness? Buddhism also acknowledges temporary happiness and well-being. This completely exists. The Buddha, when present, would also acknowledge it. In current life, some people often say your Buddhism doesn't acknowledge this. It's too pessimistic. Speaking of renunciation, weariness, speaking of monasticism, actually it's not so. Our current much weariness and renunciation actually indeed have a kind of meaning. For example, I'll simply say our life's suffering. From childhood until now, or when dying later, in the entire life, birth, aging, death, sickness, our suffering of illness, suffering of death. And also in life, various kinds of suffering. If one self-summarizes, one will discover in life suffering is more, happiness is less. People with status have their suffering. Previously in Tibet, there was a particularly famous scholar who said wealthy people in their wealthy life suffer wailing and pain. Poor people in their poor life also wail, also suffer. This is the true fact. We see many people all have no satisfaction. People without money think after having money, perhaps everything will be very happy, but it's also not so. When having money, they're still very painful. So we should know the principle that all contaminated things are suffering is also very important. After that, all phenomena are non-self. Non-self means in phenomena, you and I. Does Buddhism acknowledge or not? It acknowledges. Buddhism acknowledges such a self of you and me, but the so-called self, if analyzed with wisdom, the self indeed also doesn't exist. Most of us think, I am the present me. But this is just an unexamined statement. If we truly examine, is my body me, or is my speech me, or is my mind me? At this time, our person's entire body. If the body is me, are the body and I one entity or separate entities? There's specifically such an observation method. If you say the body and I are one entity, then within the body, for example, a person without hands, without feet, without eyes, the body is already incomplete, a disabled person. Does the I also become a disabled I? It's also not so. Self-grasping exists completely. If you say I and the body are separate entities, then the I besides the body. Now, if you search, you also can't find it. Between I and my mind, one entity or separate. Between I and my speech, one entity or separate. There's specifically an observation method. When observing like this, the originally thought so-called I is something that combines body, speech, and mentality all together. Just like this bottle, it's atoms, molecules, many particles formed into something called a concept. This concept is called a teacup. Actually, this teacup, besides a concept, truly doesn't exist. When Buddhism says non-self, it also doesn't mean it doesn't acknowledge self. The I in current appearances, Buddhism also acknowledges. It says the conventional I wanders in samsara, but the actual I, the true I, when observed with wisdom, still can't be found. Or we can observe in another way. The so-called present I, if formed by the four great elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, is the combination of the four great elements me, or the separation of the four great elements me. If the separated is me, then earth element, fire element is each element me. We can't say this. If it is me, for example, if I spit saliva, anything coming out from inside my body, does the I also fall down? Actually, it's also not so. I still exist completely. After this, Buddhism's analysis of I is very detailed. Finally, the conclusion reached is that the so-called I is just sentient beings' conceptual thinking, a kind of ignorant clinging. This clinging produces self-grasping. The true I, when examined, can't be obtained. Finally, through practice and through such recognition, when realizing non-self, worldly things, including suffering and feelings, are all absent. At this time, all afflictive obscurations, habitual obscurations, our usual obstacles to realizing all phenomena are all removed. After all are removed, liberation is obtained. This is called the peace of Nirvana. So such principles from more than 2,500 years ago until now, any rational person must acknowledge Buddhism's true doctrine, the Four Dharma Seals. Until now, no science has been able to refute them. Everyone knows that with science, whether astronomy, geography, quantum mechanics, or physics, generally speaking, later scholars continuously refute many principles of earlier ones, then establish new viewpoints. This is also a kind of inevitable pattern. But Buddhism's such thought, until now, there's none that can truly refute it theoretically. Is this because its faults haven't been found, or does it conform to truth? Many, including Western scholars, many current research scholars, think actually it's its analysis of psychology. More than 2,000 years ago, it already had such mature conclusions. So now also, people must walk along this path. I often also think from our external material civilization aspect, between the 19th and 21st centuries, there have been very great changes. It should be said, whether our transportation or communications inside and outside, the world now has earth-shaking changes. The changes are very great. But actually, our truly internal cognitive science aspect, actually humanity hasn't made particular progress. Including the many traditional thought concepts from the era of Confucius, Mencius, Laozi, and Zhuangzi, current people fundamentally can't keep up. We don't think all traditions have no dross whatsoever, including some rituals in Buddhism, some complicated matters. The Buddha also permitted that in later eras, not using them is also acceptable. But especially the very scientific nature has continued until now. Therefore, in Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, through many debates, face-to-face mutual debates, after debating, actually many conclusions can be reached. This is also very important. Our science can be said to be closely related to religion. The scientist Chenning Yang, he himself is a Buddhist, also a scientist. He said in different settings that science and religion are closely related, but science is limited, religion is unlimited. What's the reason religion is unlimited? One is it has survived over such a long time. And for humanity, in developing wisdom and developing loving kindness, it continuously has its inherent contribution and its creativity. So I think many of us in the research process may need to know what the ancients said. the ancients' way of thinking. This is very important. Some of our teaching methods, thinking methods, actually aren't very open. There should be a kind of self-creation. Creativity is very important. Otherwise, if teachers say what and students just accept it, this isn't very good. In some places, teachers speak to everyone, then leave a certain thinking space. Students should refute the teacher's viewpoints. If there's such an opportunity, actually the teacher also has great progress, and the student displays his thought space and his causes and conditions are more suitable. So I think one is discussing that Buddhism is very scientific, it's not antiquated. Also, what Buddhism often advocates is peace. This peace is inner peace. It's not discussing something external. How does Buddhism discuss peace? First, from within the mind, all distracting thoughts and negative emotions are eliminated. The mind is purified. What does Buddhism discuss? The true mind after purifying inner afflictions. Actually, this true mind, I think most of you present as lay people, comprehending the mind is very important. If the mind doesn't have a kind of comprehension forever in society, following the trend, following others' conceptual thinking and pace, living in this world should be very tiring. I think life's pressure, compulsion is also very painful. If within our minds there's a kind of what Buddhism calls correct knowing and mindfulness, using correct knowing and mindfulness to observe one's emotions when you're excessively restless, through this wisdom to observe how to observe, you use mind to observe mind. The mind's original face is actually emptiness and also luminosity. In such integration of emptiness and luminosity, there's no suffering, no afflictions, no worries. Everyone should be able to recognize this point. When you truly recognize this point, I'd guess that all your afflictions, hatred, these are presently absent. Sometimes we're very irritable, starting to lose our temper with others. When losing temper with people, at that time the mind is very uncomfortable. What is very uncomfortable? Buddhism calls this the angry mind. What is the nature of this angry mind? In the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, it says, afflictions are bodhi. What does it mean? Actually, the true original face of suffering, the Bodhisattva's original face, is wisdom. When you haven't recognized it, it's a kind of affliction as if bringing you suffering. When you truly recognize it, not only will it not have the slightest obstacle for you, but it becomes a kind of support for you, becomes a kind of wisdom for you. This is what each of us can practice in life. Otherwise, current people, whether with colleagues or in life encountering a little matter, immediately the mood becomes uncomfortable, as if carrying a stone in the heart. Whether speaking or doing things, very painful. Some people, over very small matters, quarrel. Without any necessity, also quarrel. That day in the news it was discussed. Two elderly people, both close to 100 years old, when the old man was looking outside. There were some girls laughing outside. The old woman scolded him. What are you still looking outside at now? Quarreled with him. Actually, this is our human nature. According to Buddhism's viewpoint, whether young people or old people, actually much of our hatred or jealousy toward others, these are all a kind of negative emotions of the mind. In Buddhism, they're very easy to tame. After studying Buddhism, is there no affliction whatsoever? Actually, it's not so. Similarly, Buddhists have greed, have anger, but they can counter it, can resist it. We can say it like this. So now I often think every year there are over 200,000 people who commit suicide. Very pitiful, including in higher universities when slightly encountering some matter, there's the phenomenon of jumping from buildings to commit suicide. A while ago I went to a school. In a short time, 5 or 6 students consecutively committed suicide. There's also such a situation. What is this situation? Actually, many people indeed have no baseline of faith. Oneself seems to feel once having faith, this is a mental illness, unreasonable. Using such perspective and language to reject finally leads to what? Oneself, when encountering a little adversity in life, has no ability to resist. This is a kind of our sadness. So Buddhism's non-violence, compassionate concept is indeed also very important, and Buddhism's such non-violence differs from other religions. In 2009 in Geneva, Buddhism was rated as the world's most peaceful, most harmonious best award. This was obtained through votes by many various different religions. Everyone should also be clear. So truly, throughout history, Buddhism's doctrine, people present also know, refrain from all evil, practice all good, stop all sins, all behavior that harms oneself and harms society, practice all wholesome dharmas, all good deeds, such a doctrine. If such doctrine is continuously put into action, actually now it should be said monasteries Buddhism has responsibility. However, now many monasteries have become entertainment, have become propaganda items, commercial items, have become tools for various interests. This also isn't what Buddhists themselves wish to cause. But current society has already declined to this point, so there's also no way, I think Buddhism's true concepts, if later people study and understand them, they will have value and function. Buddhism also has a most fundamental essential teaching, which is discussing altruism. Altruism is Buddhism's most important thought. Especially, Buddhism is divided into Mahayana Buddhism and Hinayana Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism can also be said like this. In Mahayana Buddhism, we call it bodhicitta, relying on bodhicitta. Bodhicitta can be divided into aspirational bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. What does aspirational bodhicitta mean? I want to liberate all sentient beings at the edges of the sky. In the mind, generating such an aspiration is called aspirational bodhicitta. Usually ourselves, if there's a supreme object of refuge, we can also generate it. If there really isn't a supreme object of refuge, if oneself is willing in front of a Buddha statue or in front of a monastery to generate such an aspiration, this is called generating bodhicitta. So-called engaged bodhicitta is not only generating this aspiration, but in actual action and behavior, truly going to liberate sentient beings. Liberating sentient beings in engaged bodhicitta's behavior, there are the 6 paramitas and myriad practices. What Buddhism often discusses, generosity, discipline, patience, diligence, meditation, wisdom, these are called the 6 paramitas, also called the 6 perfections. The 6 perfections can actually encompass all Mahayana Buddhist behavior. I think such 6 perfections of ours actually particularly accord with current society. If one has the 6 perfections, you can be called a lofty person among current worldly people. For example, the first in the 6 perfections is generosity. We generously give. Actually, if you acknowledge past and future lives, this life's generosity has very great benefit for next life's wealth. If you don't acknowledge this point in the worldly realm also, there should be a willingness to give up. However, current society is very frightening. Unwilling to give others even small things, giving oneself very much. This is one's own selfish mind getting stronger and stronger. Current society, whether houses or property, everyone occupies for themselves. Truly wanting to help others, help people around one, the concept, space, thinking is shrinking more and more. At such a time, our society becomes a kind of deception, scheming against each other. Gradually, people all have no sense of security. This is also a kind of social phenomenon. But no matter what, this is the benefit of practicing generosity. After generosity, what's discussed is patience. If you're interested, you should study, like cultivating patience in the Bodhicaryavatara, because many people often have bad tempers, bad moods. They can't endure anything. Some matters, for example, originally, this is a truth, but when we ourselves don't understand, we can't endure it and engage in slander. Or others harm me, slander me, speak badly of me, treat me unfairly, treat me not too well. So every day there are many, many complaints. Anbujuban, others bully me, treatment in all aspects is not good, etc. There are some complaints. Actually, these complaints also require a kind of forbearance. Cultivating our mind of forbearance is called the paramita of patience. After patience is discipline. Actually, discipline is very important. Some of you may think, in Buddhism, there are many rules and regulations, very rigid, taking this precept, taking that precept. Actually, it's not so. If we humans reach a relatively high level, they all have a discipline. In any school, in companies, in any organization, if the level gets higher and higher, the regulations constraining people become more and more. So I often say in Buddhism, the lowest precepts are the 5 precepts: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying. Now our society's baseline. If a person doesn't commit killing, stealing, sexual misconduct or lying, doesn't kill, doesn't speak falsehood, doesn't commit sexual misconduct, doesn't steal, whether a civil servant or a teacher, this is a very good, very sincere teacher. In our Buddhism, it's a relatively low boundary. So in terms of discipline, it's also very important. Discipline, patience, then diligence. Diligence, everyone knows, whether studying worldly or transcendent dharmas, any professional knowledge or skills, everything requires a kind of industriousness. Without industriousness, I'm afraid, students are in the era of learning knowledge, certainly need to be diligent, as teachers also can't be lazy, also can't be lax. If you forever remain with the knowledge originally learned during your student days, staying at such a foundation, originally a scholar said, if every day you don't study, your brain will stop. So as teachers, we also need to continuously study. Now I saw an article saying, worrying Chinese who don't read. Take a look online. Indeed, many of us don't like reading books, all day chatting, playing mahjong, watching TV, going online, looking at all kinds of messy information. Books truly beneficial to oneself, they don't read. This is what many people now lack. Actually, if we just look at Weibo, look at simple information, can it satisfy us? Actually, it can't satisfy us. We still need to study much ancient culture and modern knowledge. Through studying, through experiencing, only then can we truly enrich ourselves. So diligence is not only a bodhisattva's behavior. Any person needs to develop it. Otherwise, originally, it seems many teachers and students I know only slightly handle their specialized portion. Truly, those in current scientific research are becoming fewer and fewer. Those who like to make money, who like their own future. Actually, if our values are all established on money, without scientific research, without other religious consciousness, people living may be, as Einstein said, the ideal of a pigsty. Einstein, in his worldview, discussed that he said, "I've never thought about living a comfortable and enjoyable life. If people regard it as the most important life, this is called pigsty life." Therefore, now many of us, when mutually understanding, either kill time, chat in meaningless processes, or often live boring lives. In this aspect, perhaps we should be diligent, should learn to read books, should be like Europeans, Germans, everyone, every day. Even when sitting on trains, subways, sitting anywhere holds a book. Within a few days, finish one book, continuously studying. After this, people's quality, one's own improvement in all aspects, has very great help. In our Tibetan Buddhism, there's a saying, if dying tomorrow, today still earnestly study. It says, if in this life I don't become wise, for the next life also accumulate wisdom. The meaning is, I may depart tomorrow, but today I still need to read. A great master of Tibetan Buddhism passed away in a Beijing hospital. I heard the doctors already issued him a critical condition notice, saying at most 2 or 3 days lifespan. He very happily read books in the hospital. He said, if I die, I also won't be afraid. This is very normal, just changing a body. But reading books, studying for me, this is unforgettable, is a very important matter. Perhaps some of us, if departing the world tomorrow, today wanting to read books, don't have this interest, perhaps weeping bitterly, very sad. But some people with realization won't be like this. So we should form good habits. This is very important. Then discussing meditation. Actually, our human mentality, as just discussed, abiding is very important. When getting up in the morning, when going to sleep at night, one should sit in meditation. Chan in Han Chinese Buddhism, the Chan school's thought is very flourishing until today. So usually we ourselves abide. Sometimes turn off all phones, close the door. I previously saw a Chan master written in his room, close the door and it's a meditation hall. Actually, if the door is closed, phone is off, oneself properly abides a bit, quiets down because this world isn't very shaken. Otherwise, perhaps our lives will be in a kind of dazed state forever, busy, busy and busy. When the day you die arrives, perhaps then you rest, forever rest. Before this, even time for a sigh, there's no rest. But in Buddhism, it's very tranquil, including sometimes when you see some Buddhist monasteries you go to, you also discover it's very peaceful. Body and mind naturally relax. We ourselves create a meditation place for ourselves, whether you have faith or not, through meditation to nourish one's own body and mind. After this, for one's own wisdom, Buddhist sutras specifically discuss, from discipline arises concentration, from concentration arises wisdom, relying on meditation to produce wisdom. Because current people are very restless, all day thinking this and that. Finally, even when sleeping, have nightmares, not necessarily auspicious dreams. Daytime busy, nighttime also. Now it seems upon getting up, start going to work. When at work, also, there isn't a very good way of thinking. People's patterns have already been broken. This is also a social phenomenon. So sometimes we need to You all, as lay people, can't be like ancient great masters going to monasteries all day cultivating meditation, unmoving, continuously sitting in meditation. Impossible. But sometimes need to go to some Han region monasteries for 7-day retreats. During 7 days, all information equipment turned off, abiding. If I truly depart forever, what about my family? Now it seems if for an hour the phone isn't on, everyone feels, wow, seems I put down something, forgot something. Actually, people with, this is called phone obsessive compulsive disorder, now already have syndrome, OCD, very pitiful, also called information syndrome. So in these aspects, it brings us great stimulation. After this, our lifespan and memory directly receive certain impacts. It is very important to calm down. The sixth is called the Paramita of wisdom. Using Buddhist wisdom, it observes worldly astronomy and geography, as well as all-encompassing knowledge. More importantly, besides material phenomena, their essence, for example, this microphone, it also acknowledges all its structure and phenomena, but more importantly, what exactly is its nature, or about the mind arising in my mind, also observing my present mind. I don't know if you've read the Diamond Sutra. The mind of the past cannot be attained. The mind of the present cannot be attained. The mind of the future cannot be attained. Why say this? When truly observing with wisdom, the past mind is ungraspable, because it's already ceased. The future mind is ungraspable because it hasn't yet arisen. The present mind is ungraspable because it has no entity. We ourselves think, how can the mind be ungraspable? What I'm presently thinking isn't this mind. You can say this, but this is just phenomenon. Phenomenon is what everyone acknowledges. Some people say, you're Buddhism, everything is emptiness. Actually, everything isn't all emptiness. At the phenomenal level, we also haven't said everything is emptiness. All these phenomena we acknowledge. But in terms of their nature, indeed, they're also originally empty. Including the past, present, and future mind we just mentioned, some people think past mind and future mind don't exist. Acceptable. How can present mind be empty? Present mind can also be observed. For example, your so-called present is 1 second. 1 second can also be divided into 1/10,000th. 1/10,000th of a second, analyze further. Where exactly is the truly present mind? I'm afraid any scientist also has great difficulty finding it. If you acknowledge the present mind exists, then you say, is the present mind 1 second or 2 seconds? We might say the shortest is 1 second. 1 second divided into 10,000 parts. Is one of those parts the present? Also dare not say. It can also be divided like this. After this, Buddhism originally said not only is everything external, mountains, rivers, earth, all phenomena empty, including everything internal in our minds essentially is empty. This observation method is very scientific, doesn't need any instruments to experiment. This is using true wisdom to determine. At this time, your paramita of wisdom is not only worldly wisdom, but also transcendent wisdom. Such wisdom, we now also must acknowledge, such wisdom is an invention from more than 2,500 years ago, not what physicists only now started inventing. After this, I especially hope everyone present, when you have time to understand Buddhist doctrine, can elevate this knowledge of one's own, because many problems in our lives, actually material things may not be able to completely resolve, status may not resolve, culture may not resolve, especially traditional culture and religious thought can very easily resolve our spiritual problems, and we humans often have problems, have psychological problems, just like a car's key parts. Actually, it's not in the external shell. Its maintenance isn't necessarily most important is its engine. The things most inside often have problems. So when we humans have problems, mainly problems arise easily internally. Whatever life will all be disrupted. If my inner mind is very sound, very healthy, even in prison, even in the most terrible environment, you'll stand up. So I think many people now, no matter how high their status, how abundant their wealth, actually need inner adjustment. Otherwise, however successful a person, sometimes we open the news and look, this person is so successful. Why suicide? Why is this person, when facing suffering, so fragile? It will be like this. So I think for our truly inner health, needing to have a kind of religious mind training method is probably best. Of course, in our brief time, it's also impossible to discuss how religion practices, what religion's methods are. In these aspects, we also can't finish discussing. But through such guidance, gradually oneself will also find. Even if you generate some doubts about this aspect or generate some good feelings, from it you'll also obtain some positive information and benefits. So I hope everyone uses an inclusive mindset to treat Buddhist doctrine. It can integrate with many concepts of current society. I myself think indeed also in current society, even more needed is some religious guidance. With religious guidance, life is lived very happily. Not only this life is happy, the next life will also be happy. All right, thank you everyone.